everybody. Welcome to our Women in Sales webinar. My name is Amy Carroll. I'm a corporate sales manager in HubSpot. I've been in HubSpot for 7 years in our sales organization, and it's been truly a great experience. Today, we have 3 other wonderful women from our sales organization, and we are going to talk about our experience of being a woman in sales and what it means to us. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. Flavia, if you can kick off, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and how you got into sales.
Hi, everybody. I'm Flavia Colombo. I'm a sales director here in HubSpot. I joined HubSpot only 1 year ago, but I've been in sales now since 18 years, which is really long if I'm thinking about how did I ended up in sales and in tech sales. That was kind of probably with a lot of women as my age by almost by mistake. I was not thinking about sales at all. I studied marketing and I studied international management. And then I had the opportunity to start an internship in IBM when I finished my master degree. And then I had the chance to move into IBM, but abroad in Scotland. And very start from the very bottom, because I was in customer service, so I was not even in sales. And then suddenly, I kind of realized that sales, it was where I wanted to be. Very, practical in terms of, I won't deny the money was probably one of the best paid job in particular in Ireland. And then it's when I moved in Ireland that I started my career in sales. So I joined first iTech company joining sales position was EMC, that now is Dell, and it was not easy. I was the only female in my team, and we were probably 5 across 70 inside sales rep in the floor. So at that time, the balance or gender balance was very low for female. We were very little, and a lot of times, we were just 1 or 2 in the room. And then moved into a management role. I had the chance, the company really invested in me, I have to say, and I moved into a management role, and from there got into a senior role as well. So that's a bit my journey, how I started in sales.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common for a lot of women, isn't it? The when they start their career, often they're the first or one of few females in the sales team. Like that was definitely my own experience as well, which can be challenging. And we'll probably get to more of that later. But I think that's quite common, and interesting that you came from a customer service background as well.
Yeah, and I had, in my journey, I started customer service, then BDR, and then I went into an inside sales position. And even if I think about, only 4 or 5 years ago, I was the only sales director female across all Europe in a company I worked before. And as you said, it's not easy. You don't feel the inclusion when you are, in executive meetings. You are the only one. So it was a hard time, to be a woman in sales and a woman in leadership.
Yeah, definitely. I want to dive into that as we go through the chat. Noora, tell us about yourself.
So my name is Noora Harju, and originally from Finland. I've been working here at HubSpot. This is my 6th year. This year could be my sabbatical. Here at HubSpot, we get a sabbatical where we can travel for 1 month just to kind of unblock and recharge. So let's see if the situation permits. Maybe I'll do it this year, maybe next year. My story is very similar, that kind of end up in sales accidentally. I was actually supposed to graduate as a French teacher. So that's my background. And then at that time, it was pretty tough to get like a permanent job as a French teacher. Usually you have to do like these small periods in schools, but you can't really get like a like a contract for a long period of time. And then I started thinking that what could I do? Because if I'm not going to continue teaching, like could I somehow still like leverage my languages in some other area or in some other industry? And that's actually where the whole idea of getting to sales came from. So I always remember I was that time living in Copenhagen, and I was listening to this old radio called Dublin 8. It doesn't unfortunately exist anymore. And in the radio, they were talking about this huge tech hub that is building up in Dublin, and they're looking for language speakers in Dublin. And that was when my husband said, like, you talk so many languages. Like, have you ever thought about like being in sales? Like, looks like in Dublin there's something going on. So that was when I actually ended up applying for HubSpot. And of course, I was very lucky to get into the process. Started at the BDR level, so similar to Flavia. Of course, I wasn't in customer success, but really much like early days from a BDR position. And since then, I've been working as a BDR, as account executive. I've been working in channel sales, and then most lately, I had the chance to be promoted to a sales manager and start developing my leadership skills here at HubSpot.
Like Noora, sabbatical, but I took mine last year actually. I saw an opportunity when there was slight ability to move around Ireland at least, and I took my sabbatical, and it was really great fun. In terms of how I got into sales, surprise, exactly like you guys, I fell into it. It was not a conscious decision of mine to go into sales, albeit it was a conscious decision to look at the tech sector. To be fair, I just didn't know what capacity I wanted to be in within that industry. I came from a very, very different background. My studies was in biomedical science. I had a view to go into a research role, so working within a lab, or if not that route, I was very interested in clinical science, potentially in speech and language therapy or something along those lines. However, I didn't want to pursue that after doing a little bit of practical work within the region, within the area. And I had a lot of friends and family actually that worked within the tech sector, and I just loved hearing their stories about how fast-paced their job was, and things like that. And that's what really drew to me initially. In terms of sales, I was very lucky. I had a brother that worked in a tech company, and he said to me there was some positions there, and I was like, okay, let me have a look at these. And it was an SR position, which was kind of below a BDR position even. To be fair, I wasn't even fully sure what the job was. If I'm completely honest with myself at the time, I was just out of college, probably a little naive. But I was like, this would be a great opportunity to get into this organization and just get a feel for what I want to do. So I took the role. I interviewed obviously, and I was successful, and I got the role, and I worked up into a BDR position there, and then I moved into HubSpot as an account executive, and have been here since, working several different markets and different segments and learning loads. But yeah, it was not a conscious decision to get into sales, but I'm so glad it happened. And I do think that I'm seeing people especially women, view sales more and more as a career option. And I think we kind of need to keep flying that flag that it should be, a career option that people actually proactively think about, because I've definitely learned so much over the last 6+ years.
Very good.
I'm even curious. I didn't know about this background, Ciara. Actually, I'm very intrigued now, like seeing like such a huge like a career shift. So I was wondering, like, what would you maybe say to someone who maybe have chosen a career, let's say if it's not in bioscience or maybe even in education or whatnot, like, how would you help them to kind of make that decision if they are thinking about maybe moving to sales?
If they're thinking of moving from a completely different background, is it? Yeah, I think the biggest thing is actually just focusing on your strengths and believing in yourself. And that might sound a little bit high level, but a lot of the times, and I think women especially, we focus and spend a lot of energy focusing on the areas that we think we're not strong in, and all the reasons why we would not be a potentially good fit for that role. And don't get me wrong, it's very, very important for us to be aware of our weaknesses, because that should form part of our PDV and our development plan, and we should definitely be aware of it, but it should not be an energy suck. It should not be something that prevents us from raising our hand for something, or for a new career move. So focus on what you're good at and focus on what you can control, and then just go for it, just try it. People kind of look at me and say, oh, biomed and then tech sales, like there's absolutely no correlation there whatsoever. But it's actually untrue, in the sense that if you look at a sales role and any successful salesperson, they have a process. They have a process that they can iterate. They constantly look at the data. They constantly look at their stats. They constantly understand all of that information. That's exactly what you do in a science or in a research role. You know, you're running experiments. You have a hypothesis. You need to create a method. You need to prove it. You need to see if it's significantly effective. So it's really weird where you can find kind of areas that might actually marry quite well with a sales position. But I would say just focus on your strengths, and don't be afraid to go for it. Be proactive in it, for sure.
I really like that tip. That's absolutely amazing. Like I feel myself the same, that you, as a woman, I tend to kind of look at like things that I'm not good at, or if I look for a job description, I'm like, oh, I don't have that yet. I don't have that either. And then I just feel like if I don't have the 2 or 3 of them, I'm just like, okay, this role, it must not be for me.
Yeah.
I'm maybe curious to hear also like from you both that, you know, how do you identify, or how do you kind of find those strengths? Like for myself, I got once a tip from a HubSpotter that said that talk to your friends and talk with the people that you work with, and just go and ask them like, what are the things that they see that you do really well, or what when working with you is usually something that they really like about, like really just having that kind of an upfront conversation with somebody close to you or has worked closely with you, and see what they appreciate you in you as a person. So that's something that I've been trying to work on. But maybe I'm curious to hear also from you, like how do you enable yourself to kind of like identify those strengths and kind of like making sure that you can make those also top of mind?
One of the things that I've been, advising a lot of not only women, but everybody that wants to progress into a new role. Sometimes we don't realize how many competencies we have already. So a good exercise is to think and writing down competencies of what you're doing on a daily basis. For example, on my side, when I was looking for a new job, I said, okay, I'm a sales leader. That's what I know. And then suddenly I started to look. I had experience working with the channel. I had experience on leading BDR and doing completely pipeline generation. I had experience on coaching, developing people, had experience, on putting strategy. So really writing down what you're doing and start to build that competencies and grouping them in a competence will give you a good understanding. Okay, these are my strengths. This is what I already know. And believe me, you will be surprised how many things you can put in, even in your CV, or even if you go for an interview, and that will build, even your success to progress in a new role.
Yeah, one of my a girl I used to work with, she actually gave me a really good tip once just on that, Flavia. She said you should create a brag folder or a me folder, and every little thing that you do, you should document it within that. Or every little email you get shouting you out about something, you should put that in there, and it just creates this little area that you can go if you're kind of feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can raise my hand for that job or whatever it might be, and you can see everything and it's completely documented, and you can see other people praising you and telling you you're great at this, but equally see all the work that you've done. So that was just one little tip I got years ago that I still use today. I think it's really useful.
It's really thinking about what you do. I'm meeting a lot of people that they want to progress in their career, and they're asking me, oh, I need to develop strategic mindset, or I need to develop this competency. And then we look, okay, what have you been doing in terms of project or activity? And suddenly they realize, oh, you know what? I have already some experience here.
Yeah.
And they never thought about it.
Yeah.
I really like that piece of self-love, Ciara. I gotta say, like, I do find sometimes even myself, if I have a bit of a, not the perfect day, or maybe it's just like my mood is a bit low, like I do definitely like find myself like, going back to revisiting maybe some good moments. Like it could be an email, it could be some reaction, just like kind of like even doing that mind trip, like, that one, achievement from that week or from that interaction. So really definitely upvote for some self-love to kind of boost our strengths, and also like be more aware of what we're good at.
What do you all think about the idea of women kind of advocating or mentoring other women? Because I think something we've probably seen is that sometimes women are a little bit reluctant to do the brag thing or to shout about their achievements. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Ciara, since you brought it up.
Yeah, I think mentoring women is obviously great. I think in general, just mentorship is brilliant, right? I know that, for instance, I work with a manager at the moment, and he's a male, and he is brilliant at always reaching out to me with, there's an opportunity for you to present this, or really pushing what I've done to the forefront, because he knows initially when I started working with him, I would be a little bit more reserved about that. I'd just do the work and kind of just get it done and expect that that's what I should be doing. And the hardest part was just making that switch and actually saying, okay, fine, I'll present about this work I'm doing, or I'll create that wiki, or I'll do that. That's fine, I'll do it. And you feel really awkward at the beginning. But it's just changing that mindset and doing it. Now I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Absolutely. Like, I've done all this work, I'm going to showcase it. So I think getting that push from somebody that was in a position that potentially I want to look to be in myself was fantastic. And definitely, like, to me, it was a guy and it was a male manager, and I found that amazing. But women mentoring women is equally as powerful, and maybe in some instances more, because people might be more comfortable. But I think in general, the mentorship piece is absolutely key to help kind of us bring ourselves out of ourselves in one way.
Yeah, for sure. Having a manager who can vouch for you, speak for you,
yeah,
so important.
Or just give you the confidence to do it yourself, even just give you that little push you need.
Yeah, an initial boost. Noora?
Yeah.
I had a little follow-up question that's just triggered in my mind, like talking about mentorship. So maybe curious to hear from all of you and your experiences, like having, of course, like maybe an internal employee or coworker as your mentor versus having somebody who is outside of your organization. Do you have any experience around that, or how do you maybe even look for a mentor, or start up that mentorship? Maybe that could be helpful to know for somebody who's considering coming to sales and getting a bit of an extra help and support.
I think, well, I think there's probably different types of mentors, and there's coaches as well. It depends really what you want. If you want somebody who can give you advice specifically how to navigate maybe your own organization or your own role, it really helps to have somebody who's done it, who's in the organization, who understands maybe the internal culture, the way things are done, and so on. But equally, I think it's really interesting to, and I don't have one, to have a mentor who's in a different industry or in the same industry as you, as maybe further down their career path, and has worked in different kinds of companies, because then you get a different perspective. There's lots of organizations that are actually really good for that as well. I think there's the Sales Institute, and we've other kind of organizations that help with things like that. I think, Flavia, you've got some connections there, right?
Yeah, and interesting, maybe I just want to go back 1 second to mentoring women. What I felt, in the past, that as women, we haven't been so good to support each other. Where, the male, you see them really supporting each other. And there's been always a kind of, not competition, but there has been this feeling in the past where I suddenly, probably because I became even more, older or wiser, I love to, to coach women, because the first thing you will find with women is the confidence. And you kind of relate to that. And I really love, to see young female really progressing in the career. And I was doing a bit of mentorship for other female in the industry outside of HubSpot that I met. For example, there are different network community for women in sales, even here in Dublin. And there is there as well the opportunity to find a mentor in a higher position that you can talk to, or you can ask for advice. The big piece for me to be a mentor is that you need to champion the person. You need to talk about the person in the room. It's not only coaching, it's really supporting and champion the person to progress in their career. So that's something that I think definitely I became better to do. I think, I'm much more supportive of female in the industry. And I think, we definitely still need to improve on that sense as a woman.
And interestingly, you mentioned confidence as being something that's kind of common to women, or a challenge that they have. Do you think women need to be managed differently? I'll maybe ask that to you, Flavia, as a leader.
I think that, when, and I don't know if I was, the imposter syndrome, but when I started my career, you see, and as I mentioned, we had very little female leaders on the table. You kind of feel a bit, losing your confidence and want to talk or to bring, value on the table, because there is a missing inclusive piece in that situation. And I think women in general, if we're not 100% sure what we're going to say or how we're going to be perceived, we don't put our hands, we don't raise our hand. And that's something that I'm trying, to build into a female, because no, we are so good at multitasking. We have been used from when we were born to do different things. I don't know you, but all the male I know, my husband, they can do only one thing per time. So that. So we have such a great opportunity, and we shouldn't, we shouldn't consider ourselves or doubting ourselves to go forward. So that's a big step for every woman, I think.
Yeah. So maybe as individuals, we need to kind of think, well, if I was not a woman, or if maybe I had a different kind of mindset, would I, how would I go about doing this? Like maybe some other person we know would easily speak about something they've done. And maybe similarly, if we're managing women, we need to think about how we can bring them out of themselves, like encourage them to speak a little bit more, share ideas and share things that are maybe they're not 100% certain of. Ciara, you've been in lots of different sales teams in HubSpot. What's your own experience or take on that?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, to be fair. I agree especially with the fact, like drawing a woman out, giving a woman the opportunity to speak, because I think we've all touched on it slightly, but especially in this industry, in this sector, I guarantee you every single one of us have found ourselves the one female in the room in several meetings. And I think the facilitator of that meeting needs to be super aware of that, and give that minority, be it a female or whatever that might be, the opportunity to speak. I do feel that I've been super lucky. All of the teams that I have worked on, I have been one of few women on them, but never felt that my voice wasn't heard. Always had the opportunity to speak. And I do think that was down to the managers and my peers. They would proactively bring me into conversations. Obviously, as I became more tenured in the role, it probably became harder to shut me up. I was much more vocal, but I think in those first few months, even to a year, you are very unsure about yourself, and you're in a room full of very tenured people. So I think that part is very important, is giving a female an opportunity to speak, and it comes down to the other people in the room being aware of that.
Exactly, that's so true. I remember when I started managing, and I had to write down a goal for myself to say at least one thing in a meeting, because I was so nervous. I was so afraid to share an idea that wasn't maybe the best idea in the room. And at the start, I had to promise myself, okay, today you're just going to share one thing, and start there. And now, I mean, it's completely different. So it's interesting, but you're right. I think it's really important that the other people in the room are aware of when people don't speak, that maybe it's not because they don't have ideas, but they need a little bit of encouragement or support to feel like sharing those.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. Noora, this is a question for you, but we talked about mentors a little bit. You've gone the full journey in HubSpot from BDR to sales rep to manager. Is there anybody that you've worked with or been inspired by or really looked up to along the way?
A lot of people, I got to say, I do believe very strongly that, teamwork really makes the dream work. It is really about, pulling efforts together, especially when you start as a very brand new in sales, like similar to Ciara, like was I very sure what I was getting myself into? Did I know what this was about? And really being able to like feel supported, to get that knowledge and learnings from other people. I got to say that also very fortunate, especially here at HubSpot, to have managers who really show a strong belief in you. So despite doing mistakes, despite sometimes us just not getting it right, but having somebody who really like picks you up, put you back on your 2 feet and says like, you know what, let that be what you learn from it. Let's look back to the future. Let's like keep on working together. So I think that's extremely important. I did have a chance to work, especially at the beginning, also with currently our VP Christian Kinnear, who has always been a very inspirational figure for me, somebody who has like extremely amazing leadership skills to really motivate you, to help you also like identify where you can improve, what things you could still like kind of turn into a superpower that you maybe haven't recognized yet. I gotta also say that somebody I've always admired a lot is actually my cousin, who was also like one of the reasons why I got into sales. She was already in sales and I was very doubting myself, like what I was getting myself into. And she always said to me like, Noora, like, this is a numbers game, like you can do this. And you know what, like definitely when you come in here, you gave me a bunch of advice, you know, like working as an only woman in the sales floor and really like kind of building up that self-confidence and being just able to sometimes let steam out and just talk about, you know, some of the maybe challenging situation or frustrating situations. So I'd say that that network comes from like leadership team who you're working with, but also from people who are all the time around you, those maybe, you know, small mentorship or relationship or buddies that you have in close to you in your own team, or even sometimes outside of your organization, who are able to kind of build up your confidence and, you know, give you those encouraging words and just like showing that you can do this.
Yeah. And you mentioned your cousin was, you know, giving you some confidence and support with the sales piece. And I'm interested to know what you all think about like that maybe stereotype or maybe that impression that women have. And it's a massive generalization, obviously, but that sales might not be for them. What do you think about that? I think a lot of women have maybe a slightly negative view on sales or feel that it's maybe aggressive or just not a career that's suited to them. What are your thoughts? Do you think that's accurate, not accurate, or do you think there's reasons why women sometimes think that?
I think one thing I can maybe kick this off, and I'm going to keep it short. I think there's one thing that is kind of the old world of sales and the new world of sales. So, of course, if we look at some movies from the 90s and we see kind of these whiteboards where we talk about always be closing and hit the phones and whatnot, like this is like the old world. But then again, in today's world, especially here at HubSpot as well, we do very consultative selling. We really are looking into like helping and understanding what that business needs, like where can we have like positive impact in their growth. And I think that there actually women have a lot of strengths, like in terms of like excellent like listening skill, being able to be very empathetic also, and trying to genuinely understand like what that business actually needs, what they're struggling with. So when you ask me, like, you know, of course we have some of these old models that we say like, oh, women are not to make for sales, where, you know, maybe this aggressive closing, cold calling culture still existed. But I think in the new world, like women really are like some superheroes to be in sales and really like use those skills that they already have and really turn them into huge positive outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, Flavia mentioned time management or multitasking earlier on. I mean, that's a huge component of sales, right? And I think, Noora, you touched on it. The empathy piece is probably one of the most important aspects in sales, right? You have to understand the company's problems, listen to them, hear them, and really like take time to dissect what the actual challenge is, and then work through the solutions with them. Like that's effectively what sales actually is. So I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of the old world sometimes associated with it still. And I was personally surprised, and, you know, probably like you all, never thought I would work in sales. You know, my own background was music and literature and the arts. So when you actually start doing it, I think in a good culture, in a company like HubSpot, that's where you really realize, oh wow, like this is not what I thought it was at all. It's super consultative, super rewarding, really interesting. You get to learn so much about businesses and how they work. You get to speak to some really interesting people as well. So there's a lot of positives for sure. Flavia, your own experience, you've worked in lots of different companies. What's your experience of like working in HubSpot versus maybe other companies?
You touch a very important point, Amy. I've never found a company as HubSpot who really puts the customer first. That's something that really surprised me, because in sales, so what's happening in a lot of other companies, you need to get the sales done, and sometimes you ended up selling wrongly. Or advice in a wrong way to customer. Where here in HubSpot, I was really impressed by the fact that every single sales is really thinking, okay, how can I help this company to really grow? And if we're not the right fit, we say so. Unfortunately, you need something else. And I think that's something that has been unique to HubSpot. And you can see that even from our customer or the partner. That's definitely something I love, because it makes us really even satisfied on the job that you're doing, because you're really helping the company to think, okay, what's the best solution? What are your needs, and how I can really help you to solve them.
Yeah, I think if you talk to any salesperson in HubSpot and you said like, what did you help somebody with today? They'd be able to answer, right? Like they're not, I think, I mean, maybe Ciara, you can elaborate on this, but I think most people have a real connection to what they are doing for a customer as opposed to what they're selling for them.
Yeah,
which is great.
Absolutely. I agree with everything that's been said. Like, it is such a consultative approach, and it works. Just to touch quickly back on the point that Noora made about the new world and the old world. I just think that now we're at the point as well where, how do we educate people that the new world exists? Because I think that's the problem, that there's people that still view it as this old world. If you think about, like, I came from a completely different background, a lot of us did on this call, like, how would we know that this new world exists? So I think that more of these kind of conversations need to happen, so that people outside of this industry that might be interested in making the move can actually see that it is consultative, that we're solving for a customer. It's a very nice approach, and works really, really well, and you'll get a lot of success if you follow that play. So I think that education piece is huge at the moment.
So true. And they don't really teach sales in university.
They don't.
I mean, psychology is the closest subject, right? Because that's what we're trying to do most of the time, like understand and speak answers and this kind of thing. So yeah, it's interesting. I think last question for everybody, and this is the big one, work-life balance. So this isn't exclusive to women. It's not exclusive to sales. But obviously in a sales role, like, it's a target-driven environment. So it can present its challenges. What does that mean to you, Noora? Would you say you've mastered it? Find it challenging? How do you navigate that?
It's funny that you asked this. I have actually a training coming in today with my team about time management. So it's a very accurate topic and question. I think that work-life balance for me is extremely important. I see it in high regard. I think it also kind of comes from my very Nordic values, where we do see that like life outside of work has so much importance. It fulfills you, it really recharges your batteries, it makes you a better person at work as well, the more time you can dedicate also to those outside of work hours. So I think that there might be people who come to a new role. It might be a bit difficult at the beginning. You might kind of like you might have a lot of pressure on yourself because you really want to overachieve, especially in sales. We have our targets to hit, and sometimes we know that money and the accelerators and bonuses are very tempting, and we think that the more I do, the more I can get. But then at the same time, that's not really scalable, because if we just keep on kind of working all the time over hours, I mean, in some point we might end up in a burnout, and that's a very serious condition, and it's just not sustainable as a person. So I think that in sales, and even as women, it is really important we learn first to appreciate that time that we spend outside of work, and then if we feel that we're not able to squeeze in all are worked within those 8 hours that we work, I think we should definitely like look for and seek for help for people who have found a structure in a similar role, and build up a process for ourselves to make sure that we really stick to closing our laptop, whatever that time is, if it's at 4, if it's at 5, but we really close that laptop and we unplug, and we kind of promise to ourselves also to dedicate that time to be present with our friends, to be present with our family. So for me, it really drills down to that time management and finding that good structure to your process on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and your Nordic values. I think that's a very good point. You've got a good assessment of the value of non-work life as well. Flavia, what about you?
Yeah, no, for me, it became very important. Not like I didn't grow up as Noora with the value of the work-life balance, but I kind of got to the point, when I became a mom and I got a family, I had, I was working very hard, because still on the career progression, you put a lot of work into that. At a certain point, you start to realizing what are the things that really matters. And you kind of realize the time is the most valuable thing I have. And for me, it's been, I mentioned to you, Amy, in the past, at a certain point in my career, I decided to take a career break. For 1 year, I said I really needed the time to think about myself, about my family. I wanted to spend time with my kids. I wanted to drop them at school. I wanted to go with the mom for a coffee. And I love that time. I love it. And I think it really helped me to be re-energized and to understand what I wanted from my next role. And when I joined HubSpot, I was so happy because I think HubSpot gave you such an amazing flexibility. And now, even with the pandemic and after the pandemic, the idea that I could work flexi or I can work remotely, it makes me so, it makes my day, because even in terms of being loyal to the company, I will be able to drop my kids. I will be able to pick up them, and of course, I'm not saying it's easy when you have your life and you have work, as Noora was mentioning, or we are in sales, we need to achieve numbers, but at least the fact that I don't have to worry, and I can make my day work for me and for my family. So I'm spending quality time with them when they're awake, and maybe I'm working later, when they're in bed. But to have that flexibility, I think, is priceless.
Yeah, and I think the trust is so important there, isn't it? That everybody else in HubSpot trusts that you're doing your job, and it's it's not about time on the clock or the hours that you've put in. It's the work that you've done, and that you're working your job around your life, which is the way it should be, right? Yeah. Ciara, what about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. It drills down to time management. So I totally agree with Noora on that. And then, yeah, Flavia hit the nail on the head with the flexibility piece. I think the traditional 9 to 5 is dying out, right? And it's great to have that opportunity to be able to work when it's good for you. The only other kind of thing I would layer onto that is, for me, work-life balance. Like, you can create a facade of work-life balance. We can all take the days off, we can all be told you need to take these days off, and you should take these days off, but do we really unplug? Do we really switch off? And that's really important for me. So when I'm off, I don't want to be thinking about, oh, I have that presentation that I have to do on this coming Tuesday, or I have a big demo on Thursday, because it just drains you, right? And in order to avoid that and falling into that kind of trap, you need to work in a place that is fully supportive. You need to work in a place where you have all the resources available to you to be the best that you can be, but then also all the resources available to you to help you. When you're off, you shouldn't come back after taking a 3-day weekend into a 4-day week thinking, I have to do 5 days work in 4 days. You should have resources and colleagues and peers that are there to support you while you're off as well. And I think that's something that thankfully is very evident at HubSpot. Use my example of taking my sabbatical last year and coming back after a month. That should be super daunting to any sales rep, because you've been out of the pipeline building motion for a month. But I came back and my colleagues had helped out while I was away, and they had kind of nurtured my accounts for me, and I came back into somewhat of a pipeline, which was lovely. And I think that type of camaraderie really, really helps as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's important when you're looking at where you want to work and the environment that you need to support a good lifestyle. Like those things all have to be present. I spoke to somebody recently that said they found it really challenging after taking some time out to be with their children, similar to what Flavia described, and had some really not great experiences. But she was pretty positive about it, because she said it was a really good indicator as to the type of organization they were. So which is she was very clear on what she was looking for. You know, because the family is important. It's important that you're working somewhere that aligns with that, and that you can create boundaries as well. So really, really good. Well, I think we've talked about some really fantastic topics, really, really important to not just women in sales, but, you know, people in sales in general. But hopefully anybody that's watching finds it useful and interesting. So Ciara, Noora, Flavia, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate everything. And hopefully we do this again.